Thank you. Welcome to this session. I'm going to share some information on the following topics. I'll address who the audience is for this session and share a few pertinent resources. I'll also review the definition and identification details around homeless. Then we'll explore the student summary report, the student records transfer, and the QA homeless report. The audience for this session is the district homeless liaisons or coordinators and any school level staff who are responsible for homeless data. These resources will be helpful to you throughout the school year, and we've provided links to each of those. So how are homeless students determined to be eligible for McKinney-Vento services? Every case is reviewed on an individual basis and compared to the definition as outlined in Section 725 of the McKinney-Vento Act as amended by ESSA. It defines homeless children and youth as children or youth who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. The key to determining eligibility is the living situation. And in the case of Doubled Up, it's also the reason for the living situation. Since every case is different, we can't give blanket eligibility. McKinney-Vento eligibility determination requires a case-by-case review. For example, you can't say that everyone in a particular trailer park is homeless. In order to be considered as living in a homeless situation, as defined by the McKinney-Vento Act, one of the three requirements is not met. If a living situation is fixed, if it's regular, if it's adequate, then it's not a homeless situation. A fixed living situation is defined as a person has a true fixed permanent home, and that's their principal establishment, and whenever he or she is absent, they have the intention of returning and has no present intention of moving. For example, a trailer may provide a roof over their head, but it's not fixed if the child doesn't know for sure if it will be there when the child gets home from school. And you'll have to use a discerning eye when determining if a case is not a fixed living situation. A regular living situation is one in which the family has stable housing, and it's a stable living arrangement in which the student is not mobile or migratory. An adequate living situation is one in which the housing is lawfully and reasonably sufficient to meet local housing standards. So every county has those housing standards, so if you're trying to make that determination, you'll have to look at your county standards. And if a family, if the home doesn't have running water, or if it doesn't have electricity, or if they're living with black mold, or if there's holes in the floor, then they are not living in an adequate or standard living situation. And another thing to remember about homelessness is that there's no time frame. Eligibility determination should be reviewed annually at the beginning of the school year. Once a child is marked homeless during the school year, they have rights under the McKinney-Vento Act until the end of the school year, even if they become permanently housed during the school year. Next slide, please. Thank you. To enter your homeless data in Infinite Campus, go to Student Information, Program Participation, and then Homeless. If a student is eligible for homeless services at any point during the school year, a homeless record must be created in the student's record within Student Information, Program Participation, Homeless. To finalize your entry, you must document the primary nighttime residence and unaccompanied homeless youth designation. The homeless services and record must remain active through the remainder of the school year, regardless of whether the student's living status changes. Any student determined eligible for homeless services, preschool through age 21, should have a homeless record created with dates spanning the entire academic year. And remember, homeless records are confidential, so access should only be given to the appropriate staff. For the primary nighttime residence entry, select the residence of the student at the time he or she was determined eligible. Two conditions must be present for a child or youth to be considered an unaccompanied homeless youth under the McKinney-Vento Act. The child's or youth's living arrangement meets the Act's definition of homeless, and the child or youth is not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. A guardianship issue alone without homelessness does not convey McKinney-Vento eligibility. Sometimes we get questions concerning guardianship and homelessness. For example, we might get a question like, what if the child's living with grandparents without the grandparents having guardianship? So you would have to ask, was it a family choice? For example, the family takes a job and leaves the senior student with grandma to finish the year. That's not a homeless situation. Homelessness is based on the three factors in the McKinney-Vento Act definition that I shared a few slides back. Each case must be analyzed to determine whether the living situation is a result of financial hardship or an emergency or disaster, or was it a choice that was made while the family was not in distress. Unaccompanied homeless youth status may be particularly relevant for migrant youth who come to the U.S. alone, they're in search of work, or who, through a variety of circumstances, no longer lives with their parents. These youth may find themselves homeless and unaccompanied due to economic hardship and separation from their parents or their guardians. The student summary report is available by going to Student Information, Program Participation, Homeless, and this report generates a list of homeless records for a specific student. Homeless data transfers as a summary through the student records transfer process. The data will be in a PDF file, which means the receiving district will need to create a new homeless record in their district database for the student. The data elements on the PDF should be entered into the receiving district's database as shown on the transfer document. The start date should be updated to reflect the date in which the student enrolled in the receiving district, and the end date will auto-populate to 6/30 of the reporting year. Once a student is identified as homeless, the student's homeless record, including primary nighttime residence and unaccompanied youth status, should remain selected in the student's record for the remainder of the academic year, regardless of whether his or her status changes. This includes students placed in a facility or placed in a group home after the identification of homeless in the current academic year. These state-published ad hoc reports are available to assist with identification of homeless students transferring from another district or who were homeless in a previous year and may need to be evaluated for homelessness in the current year. Appropriate staff must be granted access to these reports by the district. The purpose of this detail report is to provide a list of homeless students to be used for state and for federal reporting purposes. The detailed report also provides the user with highlighted elements that indicate data quality issues. This report should be generated on a regular basis throughout the school year to identify homeless students enrolled in the district and identify any data quality issues that need to be addressed. Appropriate user access must be granted to staff who need to generate this report. Filter the QA detailed report on the free reduced lunch column to ensure that all homeless students are receiving free meals. The report highlights the field as an error if the status is marked reduced or paid. Please collaborate with your food service coordinators to ensure that the student FRAM record in Infinite Campus is updated and the student is receiving free lunch for the remainder of the academic school year. The aggregate report will generate in PDF, and it contains unduplicated counts of students identified as homeless anytime during the reported year. This report also calculates a percentage of homeless students by gender and by race, ethnicity, by grade, by living status, and by unaccompanied youth status. Please share the aggregate QA report with district and school leadership for both awareness and for quality assurance. Please make sure to validate your homeless records to ensure accuracy for the school report card and for other federal and state reporting. The district homeless liaison or coordinator should ensure the correct students are reported, including any withdrawn students. If the homeless indicators were imported from a prior year enrollment, the homeless liaison should review the homeless status in the current year and update the program participation indicators as necessary. Homeless data should be complete and it should be accurate by June the 30th each year, because KDE extracts the homeless data on July the 1st from the district data warehouse. And at any point in time through the year that you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Marjorie Connolly or to me.
Thank you, Missy. We have a question, which every time I try to click to look at the question, I keep opening a new question. But if a student is 18 and leaves home without parental permission and moves from friend to friend's house, are they homeless?
When you look at identification, I hesitate because, like I said earlier, you always want to look at these cases on a case-by-case review, and there's never an easy answer. You always have to peel back the layers and get all of the evidence. So my initial response would be yes, but you always, at the district level where you have access to information, you want to gather all the information possible to make that determination. So it's never a quick yes or no. It's often a matter of really digging in and peeling those layers back to a situation. So yes, but always collect enough evidence to make the right determination.
Thank you. We'll give time for some people to type some more questions if they have it. I know homeless is always, because it is that peeling back the layers, it makes it hard and difficult to do. You mentioned not changing the 6:30 date that's automatically put on the records. If you get a records transfer PDF and the district before you has changed the date, do you use their date or do you go ahead and leave it as 6:30, like, because they really shouldn't have changed it anyway? You know, when you're creating a homeless record in your district for the remainder of the school year, do you make it through 6:30?
It should stay at 6:30 because those kids, regardless of their status changes throughout the school year, if they were initially at any point during the school year, if a kid is identified as homeless, then they have McKinney-Vento rights until the end of the school year. So that's why we want to leave that end date as it is. Wendy, did you have anything else to add to that?
I was going to say the same thing.
Okay.
If somebody has changed that data, then that end date, then that is a data quality issue. So you definitely don't want to just mimic that in the new district. You would want to leave the auto-populated date of 6:30 in your record.
Okay. I know since we've got a little bit of time, can you go back to the ad hocs? And I know we've already pulled data, but just as a reminder to check those ad hocs for transfer students, because I checked in State Edition the other day and there were like 1,000 students who subsequent enrollments did not have a homeless record in them. Because I just couldn't remember what these ad hocs were, so I looked them up.
So these ad hocs are state published ad hocs. They are part of the data standards and are advised to be ran by schools and districts on a regular basis throughout the school year. Appropriate district staff have to be given, appropriate district and school staff have to be given access by the district IC administrator. But yes, we advise running both of these ad hocs as well as the QA homeless report on a regular basis. As Missy stated, these ad hocs will provide you a list of students who may be transferred into the district and in the previous district was actively homeless, but is not showing as homeless in your district. And as she stated, a student should remain homeless for the entire school year. These kids are very transient, so you definitely want to run this report and see if you're missing any students that have transferred in and are not receiving the homeless services as they are supposed to be receiving in your district. The homeless record prior year, but not in the selected year, this one could probably be more ran at the beginning of the school year as opposed to throughout the year. So these are basically going to say, okay, this student was homeless in the 2021 school year, but we're 30 days into the new school year and there's not a homeless record for this student, which is okay because, you know, their status may have changed and they may not be homeless in the new school year. But this list will give you a list to start with to kind of just, we need to reevaluate these kids and make sure that they're not still homeless in the current school year. So that one is probably more of a beginning of the year needed report. The QA homeless report, which Missy covered as well, has two versions. It has detail and aggregate. The detail version will give you a list of your students that are homeless in the reporting year that you have ran the report for. Something that we just recently added to this report based on a request from a district is the withdrawal date. So the enrollment end date. So that'll help you to be able to filter to see, okay, well, I had this many homeless students in my district for the entire school year, and then I had this many that have withdrawn, or I have this many that are currently active. So it gives them a way to filter out your withdrawn students so you can exclude them or include them in your analysis. So that's something new. Literally, we just pushed it out I believe, early this week. So we did send that out to the homeless coordinators along with a link to the new revised 21-22 homeless data standards. So that all went out to the homeless coordinators on Monday, I believe. So yes, all of those reports should definitely be ran on a regular basis, just like, you know, any of the other data quality reports for other program areas.
Wendy, can you go back to the ad hoc slide again?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to. So running the prior year, I'm wondering if I'm trying to think like a district liaison, that you said that running the list for the previous school year, but I'm thinking it might also be valuable at some time to run prior years as well, because these kids, they may go in and out of homelessness too. So just looking at your list from the prior year may not always be beneficial. You may want to check on some kids who maybe they've been in and out of homelessness for 4 or 5 years, and then they have stable housing for a year or two. So you still want to connect with those kids. Does that make sense, Wendy, that prior year record might be beneficial to more than just looking at the previous school year?
So you're suggesting that maybe they run this report but select the year before so that they're actually looking at multiple years of data?
Yeah, as you were talking about that's what I'm wondering, if that would be beneficial or no.
The report will work regardless of the year that you select. So it would, if that's something that your district liaison finds beneficial, then they definitely can do that.
Wendy, I believe, because I wrote that ad hoc, that you would need to make a copy of it and modify it because it is looking at the calendar, the year selected, and you wouldn't want to spend time chasing down students that are no longer enrolled in your district. So if you just go back and run it last year, you're looking at kids, some of your kids may have graduated already and you're going to just have a longer list. But if you made a copy of that, you could change, you could select the years you want to look at. Right now, it just automatically does 1 year prior to the year you're running it in, but you could adjust it to go back and look further. Also, running your QA homeless reports from prior years, it's always going to pull your active students this year, but you could cross-reference them and look at them to see students that are no longer identifying as homeless.
I would advise homeless, coordinators to look at these reports and read the details of the report, and just run the reports and become familiar with them. And I think that would help for them to figure out exactly how they feel it would help them to use in their districts. Definitely both very good resources, particularly the QA homeless report. And being able to filter and clean up any lunch economically disadvantaged data for the student, and see who is enrolled in your district and who is withdrawn from your district, because even those withdrawn students still count as homeless for your district for the amount of time that they're actually enrolled in your district. So all great resources. Definitely share those with your staff in the schools and districts that are actually entering the data. Just like we said with other program areas, the homeless coordinator role is updated in Person Role Manager. That's the distribution list that we use and that Missy uses to communicate with the districts. So look at the open house directory, make sure that the correct homeless coordinator for your district is listed there. And if they are not, then work with your district WAPOC to get your name updated in that role, because again, our communications all go to the district level staff with the hope that those are shared with the appropriate school level staff. So just want to make sure we said that in this presentation as well, just because that person role manager, now's the time where a lot of those changes are happening within the schools and districts. So we want to make sure and get that updated.
Wendy, we have one additional question, but it's really for you from the prior presentation.
Okay.
They're just asking for advice for a new safe school administrator.
Advice for a new safe school administrator. Okay, so definitely visit our KDE Safe Schools Data Collection and Reporting website. There are lots of resources there, including past PowerPoint presentations. Definitely become familiar with the behavior data standards. Make sure you have access to the Safe Schools report so that you can generate that on a regular basis. Make sure that you have access to the restraint and seclusion error report so that can be monitored as well. But my best advice, like I said, would be to become familiar with the data standards. Look at the resources there, view some of the webinars that are posted, that are linked within the data standards, that kind of walk through the overview of behavior administration and behavior data entry, which is also what I went over today. But if you want to hear a different voice, then you can listen to those webinars. And like I said, they're sectioned out, so you can only listen, you don't have to listen to what's relevant to you at the time. Those would be my best advice for the new Safe Schools administrators. Anybody that's been in any of my sessions know that I'm like, data standard. I preach that to everybody. Those standards are meant to help you and to help you understand what is required to be entered into Campus for state and federal reporting purposes. So just make sure that you have that printed and handy at your disposal, and make sure you're sharing that with your your district staff, or I'm sorry, your school level staff that are actually entering the data, because you're going to be kind of at their mercy at the end of the school year when you're running the report. You want to make sure that they know how to enter the data and that they're entering it correctly as well. Lisa or Jennifer, do you have any other thoughts that you would like to provide to a new Safe School administrator?
One thing I remember, Wendy, from some user groups a couple of years ago, one district had given all their school principals or all their administrators access to the admin section of behavior, and they had gone in and added behavior events that were not properly mapped, which was causing their Safe Schools data not to report correctly. And I believe, what is our recommendation on behavior events being at a school level?
Okay, so I mentioned this in my training session. Behavior admin user rights should be limited to really limited to district level staff that are responsible for Safe Schools. So your Safe Schools administrator, that person, and maybe your CASIS Infinite Campus administrator. There should be limited access to the behavior admin portion. You do not want schools to be able to go in and add event types or resolution types and things that can hinder the data quality of your Safe Schools report. So, again, user access is definitely a local district decision. KDE just strongly recommends that behavior admin, just like any other admin sections of Infinite Campus, be restricted to those that really only need to be able to update that information, because it does drive that behavior admin drives all criteria for your Safe Schools report. So the limited access would be definitely advisable.
Thank you.
Good questions. Anything else?
The only other tip that I would add for the new Safe Schools administrators is to run the Safe Schools report monthly to verify that the day that's being entered and clean up those errors. That'll help you in the long run towards the end of the school year. And it also helps them monitor if the behavior is being entered in a timely manner, just not being stacked on someone's desk.
Yes, very good advice. Just like we had said in the presentation, that we advise it to be ran on a regular basis. I said quarterly, but for some of your larger districts that are, that have a lot of schools, a lot of students, and possibly a lot of behavior events, monthly would probably be definitely the best time frame.
And I know particularly in January, you tend to see things that are being entered that were from December. And you'll end up accidentally on the nice little calendar pickers in your web app, depending on which browser you use, going back to December, but not realizing the year didn't change. And so you just created a behavior event that occurred on December 12th of the current year. So wrong year. But
if you remember in my presentation for Safe Schools, that those start and end dates and times are very important. On the resolution, the date and time of the date and time of the event, etc. All of that stuff is very important to the length of time the student is involved in a resolution. So you definitely want to enter data on a timely manner so that you don't have some of those discrepancies like Lisa just described, where we've selected the wrong year or we've selected the wrong AM, PM designation, etc. So definitely stacking a behavior. I know everyone is very busy, so I'm definitely not going to sit here and say you should do this, you should do that, but I would advise, if at all possible, to have somebody entering that behavior at least on a daily basis. Some of your smaller elementary schools you can maybe get away with, a weekly basis, but I definitely would not advise stacking, for quote unquote, the term used stacking, because as you can see, is when you're starting to enter data for multiple things, then that leads to data quality issues. So definitely agree on that.